Hello everyone and welcome to the latest episode of This Week in History. Our series going through the summer, looking at the past, day by day, what happened with Rangers Football Club. And my guest tonight, back to the top man again, the roundabout has stopped and he's stepped up for it. So Mr. Clifford, welcome aboard.
Great to be back, Davey. Really looking forward to it. And education, as ever. So I'm looking forward to this, mate. Well, especially because there'll be no games to discuss. So this might be a challenge.
I've actually got one. I've got one, but it's not at the start. I'm going to start on June the 11th. Obviously, this show's going out on Thursday, June the 11th. So June the 11th, and it's not too long ago. This is one you definitely remember. June 11th, 2017. Rangers manager Pedro Caixinha confirms the club have signed Benfica winger Daniel Candeias. Candeias then stayed for 2 seasons, played under Caixinha, played under Graham Murty, and then played for a season under Steven Gerrard. Played 97 games, scored 14 goals. Daniel Candeias, right man, wrong time?
Yeah, I think so. Probably somebody that's quite fondly thought of by the club. By the support and by the club, gave everything. Probably one of our last renowned right-sided forwards that properly played out there. Scored a cracker against Celtic, sadly in a 3-2 defeat, if I remember correctly. But all-round very good player. I liked him. Thought he was a trier. Was he magical? No. But pretty fondly remembered and a pretty decent enough player in my humble opinion. So, yeah, a nice way to start. I think Candeias was fine. Didn't pay that much money for him, did we? About 800 grand or something?
It wasn't much. It was one of these undisclosed fees. So, you're never quite sure who to believe when it comes to different websites saying different numbers. But when I looked up his stats, I was actually quite surprised how often he played in Gerrard's first season. He was almost a first. He was a first pick. So in that first year under Gerrard, we played 14 European games. He started 12 of them, and he only didn't start the last one because he got sent off against Villarreal and he was suspended for it. So he basically played 12 out of 13 of the European games under Gerrard. He made 52 appearances under Gerrard that season. So he was obviously an important part of that first iteration of the Gerrard revolution. And I remember actually when he left, Gerrard actually said that he'd hoped he would stay and he wanted him to fight for his place, but he didn't want to stand in his way if he decided he had a better offer elsewhere. So, yeah, and I think probably my best memory of him, apart from getting sent off by Willie Collum for smiling or whatever the hell it was for, apart from that, was the back heeler that set up Morelos against Vienna. Remember at Ibrox, the big European game near the start of Gerrard's reign? He played this back heeler to send Morelos right through in the last minute. I thought he was a decent wee player. I think personally only Czerny maybe since then has been a better goal threat right-sided forward on a consistent basis. Maybe.
Perhaps Sima on the right side. As a proper winger, I would think you would only really include Czerny in that. Sima was more of a forward that was pushed out, I think. But yeah, I'm with you on that. I agree with everything you say. I thought he was a fairly decent player. No issues at all. Worked really hard. Attacked, defended. He was fine. He was a good player. No bad words to say about Daniel Candeias at all.
Yeah, maybe Pedro made a couple of half-decent signings. It's about all he did right enough. But yeah, we might get to the Caixinha era at some point in this series, but luckily for you, it's not tonight. I'm going to move on to June the 12th, and I hummed and hawed about whether to include this in this show tonight, because I did say in the very first programme we would cover triumphs, we would cover the bad days as well. And June the 12th, 2012 was about as low, apart from the disaster in 1971, apart from that was probably the lowest I've ever felt as a Rangers fan. Because June the 12th, 2012 was when Rangers' main creditors, HMRC, confirmed that they would refuse to accept the CVA proposed by the consortium headed by Charles Green, and the company that owned the club would therefore fail to exit administration and go into the liquidation process. So that was the day that started all your deed headlines and all that sort of stuff, and started the whole Sevco and started the whole new club. Started all that box. And it also started the process of the SPL having no rules to deal with it and allowing fans who absolutely despise this club to influence their clubs to punish us as much as they possibly could. The amount of bloodlust that was evident that summer was something I'll certainly never forget. And you know me, Stevie, I decided that summer I would never go and visit another away ground in Scotland ever again. I would never give anybody else my ticket money. I've no problem with anybody else that does, but I personally wouldn't do it. And it was the summer that ended with us in the 3rd division, which at the time I think we all said that's what we wanted to do, but looking back was probably about as bad a thing that could have happened to us. So what were your emotions in 2012 apart from, do I have a club that I'm going to go and see anymore?
Well, apart from that, obviously there was that feeling of anger, dejection, being let down, being completely ripped apart by Charles Green and everybody else that was involved in that, because although he, was the apparent saviour, always remembers he wasn't exactly a friend to the football club. And that's all in the back of Craig White, wasn't it? So not a good time. And there was a part of me that just thought, well, we'll go to the 3rd and restructure and come back up and everything else. And it was grim. It really was grim. Some of those trips and these Ibrox and everything else were just awful to watch. I don't know what you say to it. Can you say it was a stitch up from the word go? I'm not really sure, but it certainly felt like it for all intents and purposes as a Rangers fan at the time. Dark days.
I definitely felt that.
Definitely dark days for the football club. And it seemed like it was one headline after the other, and there was all the stuff about losing the players and blah blah blah. And then Charles Green came along, and we done that 70 odd million share issue, and it was all the big headlines of we were richest club, this, that, and everything else. And then before you knew it, that was all squandered and gone by others and stuff like that as well. And at that point, I think it was just our football club was just getting pillaged by absolutely everybody. Correct. So really dark and horrible times. What do you say? I mean, I suppose it was a determination to renew and be with the club wherever they were, and I kept going, kept my season ticket and everything else. But it was it really was grim when you look back on it now, and and where we are now. It's been a journey that I think has taken longer than anyone anticipated to get over.
Oh, without doubt. I pulled up a couple of stats because undoubtedly this podcast will get watched by some people who would want to stick the boot in this particular subject. So for those that say you're no Rangers anymore, which I actually find really funny, to be honest with you. I remember going to a cup semi-final at Hampden. Mark Warburton was the manager. We get beat by Celtic, and Celtic scored. I think it was only 2 or 3 minutes to go. They won 1-0, and just before they had scored it, the fans.
Is that the one where Matt Gilks played in goals?
Yeah. I think Dembele scored it. I'm trying.
Really?
It was the League Cup. It was quite near the end of the game. He scored, and just before they scored, they were singing "You're no Rangers anymore," and then Dembele scored, and the first song they came up with after that was "Can You Hear the Rangers Sing?" And I'm thinking, how did you coordinate those two songs one after the other? Because the two of them don't actually compute when you think about it. So anyway, what I was going to say was, for this new club that they say we are, which we're not, I looked at average Celtic attendances when they didn't have Rangers to play. And 2013 to 16. The 4 years we weren't in the league, their average home crowds in the league were just over 45,000. But you and I both remember watching their games on TV sometimes, and there was no way there was as many folk as that inside Parkhead. Remember, there was a big section closed and everything. The minute Rangers get back into the league, their average crowds went up to 56,000. So they found 11,000 supporters because there was a new club in the league. Yeah, okay. If you want to put it in the comments, carry on. We'll delete them anyway. So anyway, it was anyway. If I go back to June the 12th, June the 12th was as low as I can remember feeling as a Rangers fan. And I just wish we hadn't gone through any of it. And stitch up is actually the expression I was going to use when I was closing this section of it off, because I'm absolutely convinced that the shysters that got us in this position were aimed to do it long before it actually happened, and they were aided and assisted by folk that didn't like us very much, who were determined that was going to be the outcome. So anyway, 2012, it's part of our history. It's not a part of history that we want to particularly talk about a lot, but it's out of the way, and we'll go into something a bit happier. Well, I say happier, is it? Because I'm going to go June the 13th. June the 13th, 2000. I don't know if you... I know you were going to the games in 2000. I don't know if you'll remember. June the 13th, 2000, the death was announced of one of the greatest Rangers captains of all time, Jock Tiger Shaw. The fact that it was during the closed season, the minute silence for him didn't happen until the first game of the season after it. So there was this great big gap. Tiger Shaw, just a quick summary of his Rangers career. He signed from Airdrie in 1938 for the princely sum of £2,000. He was a left back. He won the league in his first season, which was the last season before World War II. He was then appointed Rangers captain, and he remained the Rangers club captain until he retired in 1953. So he was the Rangers club captain for 13 years. He was a captain through the war years, which are kind of unofficial trophies, when he won 7 more league titles. And then he was the captain when football restarted after the war. He was the leader of the great Iron Curtain defence, the famous Iron Curtain defence that Rangers had in the late 40s under Bill Struth. And he won the league title, the first league title after the war. He became the first captain to lift the League Cup in 1947, because Rangers won the first ever League Cup. They won the Scottish Cup the following year. And the year after that, he became the first captain in Scottish football to win the treble. He lifted all 3 trophies in the one season. And then the following year, in 1950, he won the double. And that meant he was the first captain in the 20th century to captain his team in 3 successive winning Scottish Cup finals. An absolute legend of the club. Tiger was his nickname because of his ferocious tackling, which I can only imagine what it was like, because I've seen 1970s tackling, and apparently 1940s tackling was even harder than that. If you include Second World War, 584 Rangers appearances. And when he retired in 1953, he was almost 41 years old. 3 different First Division clubs, top flight clubs, offered him a contract. And he said to them, although I know I can keep playing, I no longer wish to play for anyone except Rangers Football Club. They are the only club I could ever represent. So he retired instead of playing for anyone else. Rangers appointed him their third-team trainer. Years later, they then appointed him the head groundsman, believe it or not. And by the time he retired in the 1990s, he had more than 50 years continuous service at Rangers Football Club. An absolute giant, a giant of our club, member of the Hall of Fame. And if you look at the team that he had, guys like George Young, Wally Woodburn, Willie Waddle, Wally Thornton, all in it, he was the leader. We've talked about Richard Gough being a leader of leaders when we've done this 9 in a row stuff and first and favourites and stuff like that. I think Jock Shaw was the Richard Gough before Richard Gough, as in he had a team of leaders, but he was the leader of it.
Proper legend of the football club. Tiger Shaw, a name that everybody known a bit about Rangers history should certainly be aware of. 50 years continuous service, over 50 years continuous service is quite incredible. Not much I can say in terms of, the type of player, but synonymous, I think, with Rangers Football Club and their history, I would certainly say. That's a nice one. I like that. I like the stats about it. I don't think anybody really would have known about him being head groundsman and stuff like that as well. It just shows you how we looked after people and made sure they still had a wage and stuff like that. It's different now that footballers could just retire and go and live wherever they wanted, but back then they needed to keep working, didn't they? So incredible bit of stats there, David. I like that.
Yeah, maybe the last thing I'll mention about him, if anyone's watched the Willie Matheson interview that we did, the very first question I asked him was about when he joined Rangers, and he talked about his first ever training session, and the guy that was watching him for the touchline was this old guy, and it turned out it was Tiger Shaw. And when Tiger Shaw found out Willie was a left back, he then mentored him for the next 5 years. So he not only captained Rangers when he was a player, but he also looked after and groomed the young players to the Rangers superstars of the future. Absolutely brilliant. I love stuff like that. I think that's what our club's built on. Guys like Tiger Shaw. I'll go on to June the 14th, 1982, just before your time, I'm afraid. June the 14th, 1982, Rangers confirm the retirement of long-serving winger Tommy McLean, and he was immediately appointed as the new club assistant manager to John Greig. Tommy McLean, you probably remember him as the manager of Motherwell, actually. Maybe you won the Scottish Cup with Motherwell. Manager in D United as well. Hearts as well, I think. But as far as Rangers history is concerned, a member of the Barcelona Bears. He actually won the league with Kilmarnock when he was a teenager. Played under Willie Waddle, who was the manager then at Kilmarnock. Willie Waddle then brought him to Rangers in 1971, one of his first signings. And Tommy McLean was very unpopular when he joined Rangers because he was replacing Willie Henderson, who was an absolute icon of the club. And a lot of the fans didn't want to see McLean in the team. They wanted to see Willie Henderson in the team. But gradually over the next months, they came to realise what an absolutely incredible footballer Rangers had signed. Undoubtedly the best crosser of a ball I've ever seen. One of the best passers of the ball I've ever seen. And if assists were a stat in the 70s, which they weren't, but if they were, I think Tommy McLean probably would hold an assist record that would never be broken at our club, ever. Find all the old YouTube videos of Derek Johnson scoring goals and Alan McDonald scoring goals and Derek Parlane scoring goals. Look at the number of them that's set up by Tommy McLean. It's absolutely ridiculous. The first trophy he won with the club was the European Cup Winners' Cup. He then went on and won 3 titles, 5 Scottish Cups, 3 League Cups, played just under 500, I think it was 460 games or thereabouts, 60 goals. He was a proper footballer. And I'll segue it into the Willie Matheson interview that I did. I asked Willie Matheson who his hardest opponent ever was, who his toughest opponent was. I expected him to say Jimmy Johnson of Celtic, because he was the right winger that he was always up against in the old Firm games, and Jimmy Johnson was voted the greatest ever Celtic player. But Willie Matheson said, by far, the winger he found hardest to deal with, the most skillful winger he ever played against, was Tommy McLean of Kilmarnock, and he was so glad when Rangers bought him, because it meant he didn't have to play against him anymore.
Incredible. Yeah, Tommy McLean. Motherwell in what, 91? I think
91, yeah.
Probably Ali Maxwell.
The bugger David Cooper offers, didn't
he? David Cooper played in that, obviously 4-3, one of the great games. Yeah, I mean, I don't know much about Tommy McLean. I've been at a function where he's been at, and he spoke resplendently about our football club, which he loved to hear. Tricky winger. I think I heard my granddad talking about Tommy McLean and stuff like that. But
oh God, your not your dad, your granddad. Well, thanks for that.
Aye. Do you remember old Harry? Harry's dad. Do you remember old Harry? Well, he was the first one to take me to a game with young Harry. So, yeah, he was funny. Old Gran used to say you could serve him steak when if Rangers lost, then it wouldn't be good enough. But you could serve him a sausage roll if Rangers won, and he'd think it was a steak. So, yeah, my family are dying-wool Rangers fans. So, Tommy McLean, again, wouldn't know much about him as a footballer, but with regards to the history of the club, is he in the Hall of Fame? He should be in the Hall of Fame.
Absolutely. Well, all the Barcelona players are anyway, but even if he hadn't won the European Cup Winners' Cup, he would be in it.
I thought as much. I didn't want to make that presumption. I was sure he was, but wasn't. But no, that's good to know. Good to, again, another good history lesson involved.
Yeah. When I wrote one of my books, I was given the privilege of going up to see Alec MacDonald in Kirkintilloch Rangers Club to interview him for it, and I asked him in it, all the players you played with at Rangers, which one did you like playing with the most? Who was the best player you played with? And I was expecting Davy Cooper, in all honesty, but it was Tommy McLean. He said Tommy McLean was the best reader of the game he ever played against. The number of times he would make a run into the opposition penalty box, because Alec MacDonald was great at these late runs into the box. He said, if Tommy McLean had the ball, I knew he'd find me. He could see everything round about him so well. I think he would have been a great number 10. I don't think he had the physique for it, unfortunately, but I think if he had played as a number 10, he would have even more assists and even more goals than he did come off. But he was a fantastic player, and I hear he's not very well at the moment. So if any of his family are watching, I doubt he is. If any, I just hope he makes a full recovery, because he's a proper legend, and we wish him well.
Yeah.
Right, you know how I always do a really old one with a story associated with a game. I've got an absolute belter for you in this one. I've got a cracker. Okay. June the 15th, 1946. You can just pull up a deck chair, get yourself a drink, because this might take 5 minutes for me to get through this, right? June the 15th, 1946, the last of the wartime unofficial competitions was completed. And it was called the Victory Cup, which was a special tournament for celebrating the fact that we had won the war, right? Before proper competition started again. So the Victory Cup final was in June the 15th, 1946. And Rangers won it. And there's 3 little stories associated with winning the Victory Cup. And I especially love the first 2 of them. So the first one is the trophy itself. So there wasn't meant to be a Victory Cup. It was a sort of last minute thing that the football authorities decided they would just do to celebrate the end of the war and the end of the restrictions in football. And they didn't have a trophy for it. And precious metals and things like that were really rare. They were hard to come by in 1946 because the war had just ended. So there had been a trophy during the war called the Southern League Cup. And the final had just been played. And Aberdeen had beaten Rangers in the final in front of 135,000 people, believe it or not. And so the authorities told Aberdeen to hand the trophy back. They thought they were keeping it forever because there would never be another Southern League Cup, but they had to hand it back. And they rebranded the cup, the Victory Cup. Aberdeen were raging, basically saying, this is your trophy you're taking off us. And then what happened? They get knocked out in the quarterfinals. And in the last 4 were Rangers, Celtic, Hibs, and I can't remember who the other one was, Clyde maybe. And Rangers drew Celtic in the semi-final. During the war, Rangers kind of owned Celtic a bit. They gave them a few doings, and 8-1 in 1943 being the most memorable one. So they were huge favourites to beat them, but they drew 0-0 in front of 80,000 people at Hampden, and it needed a replay, which was played in the Wednesday night. 70,000 went to that, and in the replay, Willie Waddle scored in the first half, 1-0 at half time. Second half started, all Rangers. But 20 minutes into the second half, Willie Thornton get filled in the box, penalty kick. The Celtic defender was absolutely adamant that he'd won the ball, and all the players all jostled around the referee. And they went on about it so long, one of them started pushing the ref and he gets sent off. So Celtic were down to 10 men. Crowd behind the goals going mad at this point, bottles flying and everything, all kinds of stuff. George Young, who was the Rangers penalty taker at the time, went to put the ball down the spot. A Celtic player ran up to the ball, picked it back up again and kicked it up the other end of the park. He gets sent off as well. So Celtic were down to 9 men. At this point in time, there was a pitch invasion, there was police fighting Celtic fans, the referee was getting attacked, all kinds of stuff was going on. Eventually, they restored enough order that George Young, if it took this penalty kick about 10 minutes after it was actually awarded, he scored. A bit like Alberts in 1999. He just ignored all the nonsense round about him and scored it. So Rangers had 25 minutes to play against 9 men with a virtual riot going on behind one of the goals. And there's a few Rangers players interviewed afterwards about it, basically said that they decided for the last 25 minutes just to pass the ball in their own half and not attack, because the end they would be attacking was the end all the bottles were flying onto the park, and they didn't want to go near that. So it ended 2-0. The postscript from that semi-final is that Celtic appealed to get the game replayed. And believe it or not, the grounds for their appeal was that the referee was drunk. Now, the SFA, unsurprisingly, kicked out this rather frivolous appeal, and they gave the 2 players who were sent off quite lengthy bans. But that was Rangers into the final, where they played Hibs. Anyone who knows a wee bit about post-war Scottish football will know that Rangers and Hibs were the 2 best teams in Scotland for quite a number of years, the 40s into the early 50s. Hibs were starting to get this famous 5 forward line. Rangers were creating this iron curtain defence, and it ended up they were the 2 best teams in the country. The first 7 league titles after the war was won by either Rangers or Celtic. Rangers or Hibs, should I say. We won 4, they won 3. So this was the best 2 teams in Scotland. 100,000 crowd at Hampden, June the 15th, 1946. Torry Gillick scored, Hibs equalised. Jimmy Duncanson scored twice for Rangers, one of them after only 11 seconds of the second half. Rangers won 3-1. Rangers won the Victory Cup. Aberdeen were crying because they thought it was their trophy. Celtic were crying because they said the referee was drunk. Go to the Rangers Museum any day you want. Go into that lovely museum we've got, and that lovely shiny trophy sitting just in the second bit as you go in is the Victory Cup. And it sells forever. How's that?
That's terrific. I loved that. I just sat smiling. Lovely story. I know, again, total history lesson. You could sit and just listen to that kind of stuff all day. I didn't know anything about it. I have seen the Victory Trophy, so I have seen that one, which is excellent. That's funny. Claimed the referee was drunk. Aye.
Well, it makes a change from calling an orange, doesn't it? Yeah, they must have to think of something else.
Again, that's another story I've just never heard. That was excellent. Loved that.
Yeah, so I can come up with. I'll have a few others as the months go on, but that Victory Cup semi-final is one of my favourites. One of my favourite ones. I remember researching that because when I was writing about Jimmy Duncanson, who scored 2 goals in the final. I was researching a bit about him, and he played in that game, and he was one of the ones that got interviewed, basically saying, "I'm not going up that end to shoot because I'm going to get hit by a bottle if I go anywhere near that goal there." That's incredible stuff. But anyway, okay, so that was the Victory Cup. So when next time you go to the museum, anyone who goes there, it's got a bit of a story, that trophy. And one last aside that I'll talk about. Remember, I wrote a book about Torry Gillick. One of his grandsons has got a Victory Cup medal. That he got it in Torry's will. Torry left it to him. There actually only is 11 then. There's only is 11 of those medals in the entire world. I've got no idea how much it's worth. I tried to persuade him to give it to the museum or lend it to the museum, but it means so much to his family that he doesn't want to do it. But I've seen it. There's only 11 of them in the world. It's incredible. Anyway, so June the 16th, I'm afraid I'm back a while again, but there's no way you don't know this name. Any Rangers fan that doesn't know this name, I'm wondering what rock you must live under, to be honest with you. So, June the 16th, 1875, which is a long time ago, a man was born in Edinburgh by the name of William Struth. Now, show to goodness we all know who he was. William Struth, never played professional football. He was actually an athlete. He was a professional athlete. He actually used to travel around the UK taking part in athletic events. He first got involved in football in the early 1900s with Hearts, but he was a trainer. He was training to be fit. He wasn't training to be footballers. He was so good at it that he went to Clyde as their first team trainer. And when he was there, he trained a team that got to 2 Scottish Cup finals and knocked Rangers out of the Cup 2 years out of 3. The Rangers manager, William Wilton, obviously saw that Clyde had a trainer who was very good at his job. And in 1914, he persuaded Bill Struth to come to Rangers as the trainer at Ibrox. During the war, Struth and Wilton both volunteered at Bellhouston Hospital for injured servicemen. Then in 1920, unfortunately, William Wilton died in his drowning accident, and Rangers appointed Bill Struth as the Rangers manager in 1920. He was the manager until 1954. 34 years. It's just, I don't think something like that computes anymore in terms of how long men can be managers of one club. 34 years. All the official things say 18 league titles, which is true. It's 18 official, but he actually won 7 during the war as well. So he actually won 25 league titles in 34 years. So what's that? Better than 2/3 of seasons he won the league. And there was no 2-horse race back in Scotland back then. It was multiple teams could win league championships back then. 10 Scottish Cups, including winning it 3 times in a row twice. 2 League Cups, only because it had only just started by the time he retired. I think, fair to say, he's only not regarded amongst historians, if you like, as one of, if not the greatest manager in British football history because there was no European football. If there had been, God knows how many European trophies he might have won. But his 18 league titles is more than any other manager in British football history. And the other thing to talk about him is his standards off the pitch. So Bill Struth had kind of, 2 main philosophies. One was that Rangers should always strive to be the best and should always give their players the best. And the second one was that nobody, no matter who they are, was bigger than the club. And the club always came first. He insisted that codes of dress, lifestyle, he liked his players to be married because he thought married players were more professional, had a better outlook in life than single ones. Very old-fashioned. And I'll let you talk about what your understanding of Bill Struth is, and I'll finish with a couple of little stories about him because there's so many Bill Struth stories you can tell, but there's 2 favourites I've got. But I'll let you tell me what you know of Bill Struth first.
Let others come after us. We welcome the chase.
Yeah, I don't think I think when he said it, he didn't realise quite how many years that you can wait before you actually go back on top.
Being very famous for his kind of speeches or his beliefs in Rangers Football Club. When you consider who's the giant of the football club, obviously you've got the Bill Struth main stand. You've got, who's your most famous manager? A lot of people would say Walter, because we live in a period where Walter, is more present in our collective minds and stuff like that. And, is the one that bought us the sustained success in the 90s and the late 2000s, basically. And what was it, 8, 9 and 10, 11 or 9, 10, whatever it was when Walter was in charge.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, he's certainly up there, Davey, as being the most recognisable manager in our football club's history. I think that's fair to say about Bill Struth. Again, knowledge, picking up bits of you, knowledge of them isn't fantastic. But, to win 25 out of 34 league is quite incredible. Yeah, it's what, 67, 68%, something 70%, I don't know. But I mean, yeah, phenomenal stuff, really. I can't talk about him too much because it's well beyond both of our time. But obviously, he's well known for his speeches. I would say that's the best thing. But I'm looking forward to what you're going to tell us.
It's just he had this reputation as being a bit of a dictator almost. A lot of the old-fashioned managers were kind of regarded as, ruling with an iron fist and all that kind of stuff. But when I talk about that, the vast majority, and I mean the vast majority of the players that played under him would have done anything for him. See, we talk about Walter Smith, it's very similar to what every player that ever played under Walter Smith all talks about. They would basically walk over broken glass for him. Struth was the same. I remember talking to Johnny Hubbard and Bobby Brown and all these old gents that I used to sometimes see at the football, and they regarded themselves still as kind of sons of Struth, as the expression was, and they used to wear the tie all the time even at the end of the football. But two stories, and they're both associated with the same player, because I've done this Tory Gillick book. Tory Gillick was a bit of a maverick. He was one of the sort of player you wouldn't have thought Bill Struth would actually have wanted in his team. He was very individual, done his own thing a lot. So the first time Tory Gillick played for Rangers was in the 1930s, and he was still a teenager at the time. And he met his future wife, Molly, and Bill Struth got to hear that he was courting, right? So Bill Struth brings him into the office, and he says to him, "What's your intentions with Molly?" "Oh, we're definitely going to get married. She's the one. She's the one for me." Excellent. Have you got enough money for a ring? I'm saving up for it. I'm saving up. It won't take me long. So sends him away. Struth then instructs the wages department at Rangers. That boy's to get a small bonus every week, but don't tell him, put it in a different account. 3 or 4 months later, he calls in Tory Gillick into the office and basically says to him, "Because you've played so well this season, we've got this little bonus for you." And he gives him this, but the bonus is for a reason. You've got to buy Molly's engagement ring with it. So Bill Struth actually bought Tory Gillick's engagement ring, which I think is and the reason he actually did it most of all was because he knew Tory Gillick used to go to the Greyhounds every Friday night and spend all his money at it. So he wanted him to have money left so that he could get married. And the second story, Gillick came back to Rangers, and he was a veteran player in the late 40s. And he was playing so well, he got called up for an international with the Scottish League team. There used to be a Scottish League as well as a Scotland team. But it was only players that played in the league that could play in that game. And they were playing in England down at Newcastle. 1948 was a time just after the war. There was rationing. There was a lot of restrictions still on. And the league told all the Scotland players that they were staying at a hotel that night after the game. Next morning, just have a small breakfast. Don't eat too much. We can't afford it. It's not too long to get up the road. You can have something to eat when you get home. They all obeyed except Gillick, because he was a bit of a maverick. And he ordered the full fry-up, despite the fact that it was rationed and despite the fact that it would cost all this money. And when the waiter, or however, the hotel said to him, "Where's the bill to go for this fry-up?" "Oh, the Scottish League, they'll pay it." So the bill was sent to the Scottish League. When the Scottish League got the bill, Tory Gillick went and bought this big breakfast when he was told not to. They posted the bill to Bill Struth at Ibrox and basically said, "Your player's been too extravagant. The Scottish League told him not to do this. Rangers are going to have to pay this. Bill Struth then put it back in the same envelope, put it in another envelope, and a little letter. And the letter basically said, "This is Rangers Football Club. Rangers Football Club represents the very best. Our players represent the very best. Our players deserve the very best. If you cannot afford the very best for my players, don't pick them for your teams." Didn't pay the bill. That's Bill Struth.
Yeah, again, never heard that one. The book is tremendous. I would encourage everybody to go and have a read of it. I've yet to finish it, may I add. But Davey, you know how busy I am, so that's okay.
I know how busy you are.
But a tremendous story, and that's brilliant from Bill Struth. I would imagine that somebody like Bill Struth in this day and age would be exactly what we need to deal with certain things that are going on. Love that.
If only, yeah. He had this absolute iron will that if you want everyone else to think you're the best, you've got to portray yourself at all times as being the best. You never accept anything but aim for that at all times. Nothing else will ever do. And yeah, and what did I say earlier on? 25 league titles in 34 years. I think maybe that philosophy obviously worked. And yeah, let's just hope that we can think that way again in the future. I'm going to finish with one, June the 17th. Maybe a little bit topical, although this happened in the 70s, 1972. It's about pitch invasions, which are a very topical subject. So UEFA confirmed Rangers would receive a 2-year ban from European competition after the pitch invasion that occurred at the end of the European Cup Winners' Cup final in Barcelona. That happened on June 17th. Now, a couple of things associated with that. One is that Moscow Dynamo were disappointed with that outcome because they actually asked for the game to get replayed because they said that the pitching, I don't know if you remember what happened right at the end of the Cup Winners' Cup final we won. There was a pitch invasion a minute before the game actually finished because the fans thought it was the final whistle and they ran on. And then when they get back off the park, there was another minute of play before the real final whistle went and then went back on again. When Celtic won the European Cup in 1967, their fans all ran onto the park in celebration. And I think it was pretty well known that if Rangers won that night in Barcelona, they were going to do exactly the same thing. Unfortunately, the police response in Spain was very different from the one 5 years before in Portugal. And the Spanish police took exception to fans were in the park and started to draw batons and basically starting to get violent towards them, which was only going to end one way in terms of all kinds of fighting. The ban was reduced to 1 year. Willie Waddle appealed it, personally went to the UEFA headquarters, stated Rangers' case and got it reduced to 1 year. But that's, what's that, 1972? So that's 54 years ago. And in 2026, we're still talking about pitch invasions. We're still talking about they're not illegal. And we're still talking about it's just euphoria and you can't punish people for it and whatever. We had the 2016 Cup final with Hibs. We had what's happened recently in Ibrox and Parkhead. I'm not sure that any lessons that were meant to be learned in 1972 were ever actually learned.
No, certainly not. I don't know how you stop it, apart from putting up glass barriers, apart from, having police lined up right in front of. The barriers, as you would assume, wouldn't be health and safety, because if something happened, you would be effectively trapped in, so you couldn't do that. Could you put netting or something? Probably, but then you would find a way. If you're going to get on, you're going to get on. You would find a way to do it. I just don't really know how we have that discussion. Euphoria shouldn't really come into it. But yeah, I suppose at times it does. And as you said, to be 54 years on and still discussing this is quite remarkable, and having not found a deterrent to it. So yeah, it is one of these things, isn't it? So I don't even know what else to say. It's just it is what it is.
Yeah, well, if I go back to 1972, what it did mean is that we couldn't defend our trophy, because obviously we should have been in the Cup Winners' Cup again the following season, but we couldn't defend it. And it also meant that Ajax had won the European Cup in 1972, and some journalists in Holland came up with this idea of the winners of the two big European trophies playing each other in what they called a Super Cup. And with Rangers not being in Europe, they were quite keen on this idea when it got put to them. These journalists in Holland put it to them, would you go about a two-legged game against Ajax for the Championship of Europe, basically? Rangers were right up for it because they didn't have any European football to play. And we call that the first ever European Super Cup. But because UEFA had banned us from that year, UEFA would only give it unofficial status. So if you ask UEFA who played in the first European Super Cup, it was the following year when Ajax beat AC Milan 6-1. They beat them 6-0 in Hull. We gave them a far better game than AC Milan did. We actually only got beat 6-3 in aggregate against probably the best team I've ever seen in my life, Johan Cruyff and all. And maybe the last thing to talk about that particular pitch invasion and that particular punishment, there's a lot of media stories have sprung up over the years about how Rangers fans were hated in Spain, and how the Spanish all hated them, and what a disgrace it all was and all that. That was in 1972. See, in 1974, just 2 years after the final, Barcelona held a pre-season tournament. What British club did they invite to play in it? Rangers. Why did they invite Rangers? They invited Rangers because their fans at that time regarded the Rangers fans as absolute heroes, as they had been seen fighting the Spanish police, who at that time were regarded as the stormtroopers for the General Franco, the Madrid dictator who ran Spain at that time. Barcelona in 1974 actually presented Rangers with all kinds of stuff, flowers and to the players and all that kind of stuff, because they thought that our fans were wonderful and standing up to this dictatorship as they saw it. So if anyone thinks that we were unwelcome back in Spain after 1972, just look to see what happened less than 2 years later.
I want to know what happened in that tournament.
We won our semi-final, then we got beat by Barcelona in the final. I think a player called Graham Fife scored, didn't he? I'm sure he scored against the Juan Gamper tournament or something. Gamper, Gamper, I think he's something. He was a president of Barcelona. It was named after him. Yeah, we won our semi-final, then get beat by Johan Cruyff and company. Cruyff had moved to Barcelona, but then he was following us about, basically.
Haunting us, Stevie.
What a player. So that was this week in history. Unfortunately, there was a few older ones this week. I couldn't come up with too many modern ones. But you feel educated again?
Oh, absolutely. That was wonderful. This is by far, I can only speak for myself, but this is the best show on this platform by a mile. I absolutely love this. It's like an education, and I love it. Yeah, well, I'm not quite sure what's going to be on next week, but you can be sure there'll be something from long ago that has been forgotten by everybody except anoraks like me. So we'll give it a go. Anyway, Stevie, thanks very much. I really appreciate it. It wouldn't be the same having nobody here to talk to about it all. Sitting here myself wouldn't be quite the same. I really appreciate you coming on, and I appreciate the feedback as well. I'm glad you enjoy it so much. And hopefully next Thursday, either you or someone else will be on to be suitably dazzled again. So until then, can I say thank you very much for being a
wonderful audience. Can the viewers and the listeners, if anybody wants to comment, if anybody got any memories of any of the stuff that we've talked about, feel free to talk about it. Thanks so much to all our sponsors. Thanks so much to Stevie. And I shall speak to you again on This Week in History next week. Bye for now.
The Four Lads podcast is sponsored by Rhino Express, Clydeview Joinery, Athol Industrial Solutions Limited, and CSD Air Conditioning, in partnership with Black Rooster and Art of Gold. Thank you for listening to or watching the podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show.